Can we stop Brexit? Just to be clear, this video is not about whether we should stop Brexit, but whether we could. And the answer is yes, but it's technically unlikely, although it has become more likely. And here's why.
If the government wishes to bring forward a new proposition that is neither the same nor substantially the same as that disposed of by the House on the 12th of March, this would be entirely in order. What the government cannot legitimately do is to resubmit to the House the same proposition or substantially the same proposition as that of last week, which was rejected by 149 votes. This ruling should not be regarded as my last word on the subject. It is simply meant to indicate the test which the government must meet in order for me to rule that a third meaningful vote can legitimately be held in this parliamentary session.
Even if you don't agree with me, consider subscribing by the end of the video. And if you want to check out my Patreon page for exclusive content and subscribe to that, you're more than welcome to support me for as little as £1 a month. But no, you can carry on watching TZLR news. Anyway, let's get back to stopping Brexit. The words yesterday by John Bercow imply that the government cannot bring the agreed withdrawal agreement back to the House of Commons without substantial change. Does that mean that it's impossible to bring the deal back to the House? No, but it does make it unlikely. There are ways to get this deal through the House of Commons. For example, the government could dissolve Parliament and then resume business to comply with the Eskine May Convention. That's the convention that Bercow was using to stop further votes on this withdrawal agreement. The Eskine May Convention says that you cannot bring the bill back within the same parliamentary session. So by dissolving Parliament, you change the session and therefore you can bring the bill back. There might be a way of drafting the motion in Westminster that means you can create a new motion to pass the substantial change test. In other words, ask a slightly different question to the House to get the deal passed. There's been talk of giving more powers to the Northern Ireland Assembly and the executive in the future. Therefore, it would be a motion the UK could do on its own without the consent of the EU, changing the motion but not changing the agreement. And if the European Council concludes on Thursday with the decision about an Article 50 extension completed, it could be that the Article 50 extension is put on the back of the withdrawal agreement to count as a substantial change. But if none of those changes are acceptable to the Speaker and there is no way Theresa May's deal can be voted on in Parliament again, it's more likely that the UK will ask for a longer extension to the Article 50 process, given that MPs voted against leaving the EU without a deal. An extension period has to be agreed by all 27 EU member states unanimously, and it's likely they will agree to an extension if changes are made to the deal, but not if the deal itself will be completely renegotiated, because the EU has other matters to deal with. The government are unlikely at this stage to try to extend Article 50 on the basis of holding a second referendum, as it's not in the Tory party manifesto, and there isn't a majority for it in Parliament. But at any point, a parliamentary motion of no confidence could be held against the government, and if the opposition win, then a general election could occur, with the Labour Party likely offering a second referendum in their manifesto, as they did in 2017. But it's unlikely that Labour would win that no confidence vote because the Tories would likely rally round their Prime Minister in a time of political crisis as before, and it's more likely the government will get to the end of the Article 50 extension period. If we got to the end of an Article 50 extension period without an agreed deal still by either party and a Tory government still in power, the government would likely once again go through a similar set of motions as the ones that we've just had. So there would likely be a motion on voting on no deal and a motion on extending Article 50 even further if the EU suggested that they would agree to that. But if it comes to the 5th of May 2022 and we still don't have anything agreed, then under the Fixed Terms Parliaments Act, the UK would hold a general election. There are two main ways a political party could offer to stop Brexit. Either offering to revoke Article 50 outright, or offering a second referendum with the option to remain. Under an election scenario, both would give the governing party the mandate to stop Brexit, which currently the government doesn't have. However, revoking Article 50 outright as a reaction to an election victory might not have enough support in Parliament, especially if the election creates a hung Parliament where the government does not have a majority to carry a motion through the House. Revoking Article 50 would have to be a piece of primary legislation outlined by the government. Therefore, it's more likely the government would hold a second referendum in which there's a risk of Remain not winning and leaving on other terms. So now it would be Parliament's turn to come up with a date and the details of that referendum. This could take a minimum of 22 weeks. The legislation could take 11 weeks, then 8 weeks of questioning taking place, then a week for transitioning between the referendum legislation coming into force and the campaign itself, and then of course a 10-week referendum campaign. But if a majority of the country voted to remain, MPs would have to fulfil the wishes of their constituents and a revocation bill would be more likely to pass through the House. The process for revoking Article 50 is fairly simple. The government would have to send its notification to the European Council in writing. This must follow a democratic process in accordance with the constitutional requirements. The UK will then stay in the EU and there would be no change to its current relationship. No Schengen area and no Eurozone. This does not need approval by the EU. But the government would also need to change the EU Statutes Law, which enshrines the UK's exit date into UK law. Revoking Article 50 cannot be used to postpone Brexit, but there would be nothing stopping the UK from deciding, if it wanted, to leave the EU again. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.